Welcome back to IAS Net Study. This is the ethics series and this is the 31st video in this ethics series. We were talking about moral philosophy, and in the last video we talked about Western modern philosophers. In this video we are going to talk about contemporary philosophers. There are three philosophers, major philosophers. We are going to have a discussion on them. So let's get into the discussion of contemporary Western philosophers. The first philosopher we are going to take up is Jean-Paul Sartre, and is a French philosopher and is a leading figure in existentialism. See, there are three aspects you need to focus predominantly with respect to Jean-Paul Sartre. We'll talk about that. So if you look at the entire philosophy of Sartre, it focus on freedom, it focus on responsibility. See, and here it has been choice and authenticity has been mentioned. It is the freedom. Choice is an extended version of this freedom. Authenticity is extended version of responsibility. So ultimately, philosophy is focusing on freedom. Philosophy is focusing on responsibility. Right. So the first factor you need to remember, existentialism. What is this existentialism? See, existentialism, it is a philosophical idea. Usually if you look at the various philosophies before, even ancient, medieval, if you look at the ancient, they talked about virtues and they talk about ultimate reality. And then if you look at the medieval, it is the religion, love, faith, all these things. And then power also entered into a picture. Then we talked about social well-being, the social contract theory, all these things. But here, the Jean-Paul Sartre, he talks about that whatever the philosophy we discuss or the discourse, the philosophical discourse happen, that should start from an individual perspective. It is not about the abstract idea, it is not about the rigid ideas. Let us start the philosophical discourse, let us start the philosophical discussion from the individual level. I have certain experience, I exist as a human being, I have certain experience, I have certain knowledge, and the philosophy should begin from my experience. Philosophy should begin from human knowledge. So this is what existentialism talks about. It is philosophy should begin from real human life and personal experience, not from some abstract theories. So this is what here also it has been mentioned. Existentialism is a philosophical movement that takes individual and lived experience as a starting point of philosophy. It rejects abstract, rigid systems that ignore concrete human existence, emotions, and dilemmas. Existentialists emphasize freedom, responsibility, anxiety, meaningful making in human life. See, freedom and responsibility, I'm going to talk about it in the next slide. See, when you have complete freedom, there is a level of anxiety also. That what if something goes wrong? That level of anxiety is there because you have to make choice. Nobody else is involved. You are going to make choices, and it is your responsibility. When you have freedom, enjoy that freedom with responsibility. When that responsibility you have, there is a factor of anxiety. So when you handle it with authenticity, eventually this will lead to the meaningful life. So this is what existentialism emphasizes on. So this first aspect, existentialism, Sartre's philosophy. The first aspect, existentialism, that you have to remember. The second aspect is existence precedes essence. Existence is what I exist as a human being. I have taken birth, I exist as a human being. Now from existence we move towards living. I've taken birth as a human being, now I start moving towards living. Now in that journey I have freedom. Now I have to use this freedom with responsibility. I have to use this freedom, I have to live authentic life. When I have authentic life, then eventually this will make sure my life is a meaningful life. So let me use a slide here. See, humans, we exist. It means that we are born with no purpose. There is no divine purpose, there is no nothing. He rejects all these things. We have taken birth, we exist, like there is no purpose behind it, there is no divine plan, there is no morality. When we take birth, there is no morality. And how does this moral standard, how do I develop moral standards? See, my moral standards are different from your moral standards. Even if you look at the one house, there are five people. These five people have different level of moral standards, and their ethical considerations are different. The reason is that everybody moral standards are different actually, because my experience is different, your experience different, and another person experience is different. Based on my experience, I have developed my standard. Based on your experience, you have developed your ethical standard. So it differs from one person to another person. It means that I exist now. Now I have to make choices in my life. I have to take actions. I have to make certain decisions. Whatever the sorry for handwriting, whatever the choices I make, whatever the decisions I take, whatever the actions I take, that will decide my moral character. Based on these decisions, my moral character, my moral standards, my moral knowledge are going to be formed because of my choices and actions here. Because this is going to make what I am, what we are. Our choices, our actions are going to decide what we are. See, to make these choices, I have complete freedom. I have complete freedom. Based on this freedom, based on my knowledge and my experience, I am making choices, I am taking decision. There is a complete freedom here. At this level, Sartre talks about his philosophy enters into the picture, and he says that since you have a freedom, and this freedom has certain level of anxiety also, so you ensure responsible decisions. There should be a responsibility behind enjoying this freedom, behind making these choices, behind taking a decision. There should be a responsibility. You have to take responsibility. When you take responsibility, you are going to live an authentic life. You are going to live authentically. You, whatever decisions you are making, there will be some kind of response, your actions, there will be some kind of responsibility, and eventually this will lead to some kind of authenticity. When you are living authenticity, this will lead to the meaningful life. And this philosophy is focusing on this particular aspect, meaningful life. So it starts from human existence. We exist, we take birth, and there is no purpose behind it, and we have to make our choices, we have to take actions in our life, and whatever the choices we make, whatever the actions we do, that is going to decide what we are. If I make moral choices, I am a moral human being. If I make immoral choices, I'm going to make immoral choices. And whatever the steps we take, it depends on me only. So I have complete freedom based on that. See, if something goes wrong, I can blame 100 people around me, but ultimately he says that it is you are responsible, because you have the freedom. There is no point in blaming others, there is no point in being irresponsible. It is your responsibility. Live authentically, that will lead to the meaningful life. So this is what this slide is talking about. Existence precedes essence. So Sartre's central claim is that human beings first exist and then define themselves. I take birth, and then before my birth, or when I took birth, I am like a clean slate. There is nothing in my head. There are no moral standard, there are no moral education, moral knowledge, there is nothing. As I start living, I develop these things. Unlike objects, humans are not born with fixed nature or purpose. I have born as a clean slate. There is no fixed purpose, there is no fixed nature in my character, and there is no predetermined essence. There is nothing like predetermined, I've taken birth for this purpose. There's nothing like that. There is no divine plan. There is no universal blueprint for human life also. Every person is different. The way we lead our lives is also different. So there is no universal blueprint also. Individuals create their own values and meaning, own values and meaning, through conscious choices and actions. Here this here whatever the choices I make, whatever the actions I'm taking, this is going to define, this is going to create what am I, right? And a person becomes what they choose to be. Identity is shaped by decisions. My decisions is going to shape my identity. So existence precedes essence. And the third aspect, the implications you need to remember. See, implication, the same thing, whatever we discuss in the this particular slide. It is that we are free, we have that freedom, radically free, but this freedom brings absolute responsibility. I have, there is a responsibility, because I am making the choices, I am taking a decision, so there is a factor of responsibility. We cannot blame God, we cannot blame society, we cannot blame circumstances for our choices. It is ultimately, I have the complete freedom. Whatever choices I make, whatever decisions I take, it is on me. I cannot blame, there is no point in blaming, and even it is not right to blame others, God, circumstances. No, it is not going to work. According to Sartre, we are defined by our choices we make, must live authentically, accepting full responsibility for our actions. Ultimately, if you look at the entire philosophical concept, two aspects he mainly focus on. One is freedom and responsibility. So this is the heart of his philosophy, asserting that human dignity lies in our capacity to choose and create meaningful world without predetermined purpose. And contemporary philosophers, if you look at it, most of the philosophers, they usually focus on individualistic self-interest actually, or it is not about collective interest, it is about individual interest. Even if you look at the next, we are going to talk about John Rawls, and then we are going to talk about Ayn Rand. See, John Rawls, he also talks about social contract, those aspects enter in. But if you talk about others, here we are going to discuss only three philosophers. But majorly, if you look at these contemporary philosophers, the individual existence, individual, uh, what do you say, that uh, liberty, freedom, these aspects were extremely discussed. So this is with respect to Jean Paul Sartre. Let's move to the next philosopher. The next philosopher, it is John Rawls. John Rawls, again, there was a question on this once in the mains examination. The major aspect you need to remember, he's an American, actually, American political philosopher he is, and he has written a book, A Theory of Justice. And here he equates justice as fairness. We are going to discuss that also. See, John Rawls' philosophy, again, we can connect it with the enlightenment, philosophers of enlightenment. I told you that most of the contemporary philosophers, majorly they were talking about from individualistic perspective. Here, that John Rawls is a political philosopher. The his ideas impacts, again, talks from a collective perspective. So here, justice as fairness. I'm going to expand this justice as fairness. We talked about end-based philosophy, means-based philosophy. End-based philosophy, they had negatives. Kantian ethics, they had negatives. And utilitarianism, end-based is utilitarianism. Kantian ethics is a means-based. Means-based also, they have limitations. Utilitarian ethics also had limitations. Utilitarian ethics, you know that there is a compromise of justice. And even Kantian ethics, uh, there are so many circumstances where outcome may be extremely negative. So there are negatives, drawbacks, limitations in both Kantian ethics and utilitarian ethics. At individual level, it's still okay, but when you think of social level, political level, these limitations have a very large impact. So John Rawls, he took all these limitations and he wanted to create a new social contract theory where these limitations can be eliminated. So from the perspective of social welfare, limitations of end based, limitations of means based had to be addressed. So that was done by John Rawls here. So whatever the moral foundations we are going to discuss here with respect to John Rawls, these foundations, usually we talk from a social welfare perspective, we talk from a political and social institutional. These are considered as a foundations for social and political institutions. Now, I told you that justice, main concept is a major concept is the justice. Justice equates to a fairness. There are two concepts. I told you that majorly it is about the social welfare. For the social welfare, initially, if you look at the social welfare, is I want to have a peaceful life in the society. So it starts with initially Thomas Hobbes. He talks about social contract theory. Then another person came, Rousseau. He expanded the idea. He gave the concept of consent of the governed. And again, another person came, he talked about the rights of an individual, liberty, freedom, all these things. Those aspects entered into the picture. Now, after that, contemporary philosophers came. Somewhere from collective perspective, it went to the individual level. So we talked about Sartre. So he was talking about from an individualistic perspective. Now, the idea, the discussion of this collective well-being, social welfare, that came into the picture and during the contemporary philosophers, and John Rawls is one among the major philosophers who took back these discussions, especially philosophical discussions related to social institutions and political institutions. Now he get back that discussion on social contract, and he wanted to design uh, social contract, a new social contract. But here, social contract is that I am giving my responsibility to the government to take care of me. That is a social contract. And here John Rawls talk about new social contract. And in this new social contract, let's take that political and the social institutions. Now government is there, and I have given my responsibility to take care of my security and well-being to the government. Government has to take care of me. Now John Rawls has given new conditions. What is the new condition? He talks about original position. He talks about veil of ignorance. Now, government has that authority. Government has that responsibility to take care of me. How exactly government should take care? He talks about original position. Whatever the new policies government make, Government should stand in original position. What is this original position? Original position is a place where there is no bias, there is no partiality, and you, without any bias, without any temptations, without any influence of external world or anybody, you stand in that position and you take a decision where you are completely neutral. So when you stand in that position, the main focus will be only the justice. Your whatever the decisions you make, the only focus, only criteria is the justice, only criteria is fairness. So original position. See, I am a prime minister, I have to make policies, but if I have biasness of my region, I come from a example Madhya Pradesh, then I have some kind of affiliation towards that particular state, I have some affiliation towards the particular language or the culture. Me being a prime minister, these affiliations should not be there. I am prime minister for the entire country, so I should not be having any bias, any partiality. I have to make decisions from a neutral perspective, and this neutral perspective is original position. Here I am not related to anything, I don't know anything about it. My responsibility, I have to make a law. There is nothing in, I'm not related to anybody, I'm not related to any geographical location, any language, nothing. As a prime minister, I stand in original position and I make rules. So this is original position. When I stand in original position, there is a veil of ignorance. This veil of ignorance in front of me, it means that I cannot see anything beyond that. So when I cannot see anything beyond that, I cannot connect with anything behind that veil. There is a curtain, I don't know who is sitting there, so I have to give my I have to express, or I have to showcase my authority as a policy maker here. So original position, and there is a veil of ignorance. So this is a new form of social contract. Here I am not influenced by anybody. Here I am making decision as a neutral spectator, as a neutral person here. So when I take decisions based on that, it is going to ensure justice in the society. It is going to ensure fairness in the society. So behind this veil, individuals do not know their social class, gender, race, talents, and economic status. All individuals are considered free, rational, and morally equal. Now, my decisions are not impacted by anything. So I make authentic decision, I make responsible decision, and my decisions ensure fairness, my decisions ensure justice here. So this is the new social contract, and John Rawls, he is giving directions to the social institutions and political institutions. These guidelines is for the political leaders, these guidelines are the social leaders. Whatever the decisions you make it from original position, standing behind the veil of ignorance. And this ensures impartial and fair principles of justice, free from personal bias. So original position and veil of ignorance. Now, justice as fairness. Justice is a core philosophy behind the John Rawls, and he defines justice as a fair distribution. Justice is nothing but fair distribution of social benefits and the burdens. So his theory predominantly talks about equal basic liberties for all citizens. Obviously, we are talking about a social contract, the connection between government, sovereign state, and the citizen. So, whatever the sovereign state, there should be equal basic liberties to all the freedom, liberties. There should be equal to everybody, and fair equality of opportunity, ensuring everyone has access to the social goods. So this is what equality, justice, fairness, these are the core philosophical concepts of John Rawls. And he talks about one principle, that is difference principle. Difference principle is that he talks about equality. It means that you're standing in the original position behind the veil of ignorance and you're making a decision, you're making a policies, right? But inequalities are accepted at certain conditions only. What is that certain condition? If they benefit the least advantaged members of society. As an example, reservation in our country. See, when you think from an equality perspective, it is not considered ethical. But when you think from a difference principles, it is considered ethical and moral. The reason is reservations are given based on economic, not economic, social backwardness and educational backwardness initially. Social and educational backwardness was the criteria. It means that people who are at the bottom strata of the society, reservation should help them. So the difference concept of difference principle has been applied here. So in these kind of situations where it benefits the least advantage, least sections of the society, then it is considered ethical, then it is considered moral, it is accepted. So this is what difference principle. So ultimately what you have to remember with respect to John Rawls, it is original position, veil of ignorance, uh, from the perspective of new social contract, and justice as fairness, and all these things whatever we talked about, it talks about justice. And here when you think of difference principles, justice, it's not about, not just about complete about completely about equality, it is about equity. So because of this difference principle, so justice as fairness. Now application, where can you apply this philosophy? I told you that initially only John Rawls mainly focused on social and political institution. Again, social welfare programs, social policies, whether with respect to ensurement of basic services, health services, education, all these kind of social services given by sovereign state, where implementation of social formulation of social policies and implementation of social policies, the John Rawls theory comes into the picture. And even in the economic policies also, minimum wages, progressive taxation, welfare scheme, again there is no restriction whether it is social policies or economic policies, there is no concept of inequality, everybody is equally uh, it applies to everybody in a equal manner. See, schools are open for everybody, there are no restrictions. You are not supposed to restrict to the education in our country. Everybody has equal access to the education, healthcare. I am not talking about private healthcare, you go and demand the free healthcare services, or private school too. It is not that, but whatever government is giving, it is free for everybody, and there is an equal access. There is no restrictions on accessing these services by citizen of India, whether you are super rich, whether you are a prime minister, or whether you are a common citizen. Everybody has a similar level of accessibility to all these services. And even political process also, see, I have also only one vote to, even the prime minister, he has also only single vote to cast. So there is an equality, and I can also participate in election. Theoretically I can also become a prime minister, there is no restriction in that. Whatever rules, regulations, policies which have been made, everything, everybody is equal. There is no impartiality, there is no inequality, there is no irregularity there. So even in the economic policies it can be applied, social policies it can be applied, political process it can be applied, and even institutional designs also, where uh, accessibility to the resources and opportunities in our country. See, anybody is if you want to apply for a government job, there are no restrictions, you can apply. uh, like only this particular community has to apply, or this uh, caste group has to apply. There's nothing like that, it is open for everybody. Not talking about reservation, that is different under the difference principle. But in general, it is, so there is a fair access to the resources of our country, there fair access to opportunities in our country. So applications, economic policies, social policies, political process, and the institutional designs. And what are the limitations of Rawls theory? See, whatever we discuss, it is fine with respect to theory, right? It's absolutely fine, it provides strong normative principles. But when you comes to the practical implementation, there are some implementation restrictions are there, there are some limitations to practical implementation of these theories. This is one thing. And another thing is, in the real world there are political constraints, there are social constraints, there are economic constraints, these constraints are there, and power asymmetries are there. So it does not address these kind of asymmetries, these kind of constraints. It thinks that all the societies in an equal manner, all the society thinks that every society has same pros and cons. From that perspective, John Rawls has given this theory. But if you compare the Western countries to the Eastern countries, and Eastern countries with the African countries, see the power, the symmetries, it's not similar, or the way the social setup is there, economic setup is there, educational level of education is there, it changes from one country to another country, one region to another country. So having same criteria, or same strategy for everything, and coming up with theory, again it poses some level of implementational hardships here. So these are some of the limitations of Rawls theory. So application we talked about, limitations we talked about. Yes, I think that would be sufficient with respect to John Rawls. Okay. except John Rawls. John Rawls, it's an exception in the contemporary philosophy. See, his philosophy talks about social and political institution. That you keep in mind. And again, he talks about new social contract theory, and in this new social contract, it talks about original position, veil of ignorance, and justice as fairness. Right. Let's move to the next contemporary philosopher, Ayn Rand, and she's a Russian-born American philosopher and novelist, and her well-known philosophy is that objectivism. See, I told you that most of the contemporary philosophers, they mainly focus on individualism actually, and Rand also talks about individualism, rational self-interest. Self-interest, it is self-interest is one, and rational self-interest. Even I am self-interest. Even in that self-interest also there is a rational factor. Rational factor is that my self-interest should not harm other person. My self-interest should not harm other person. This is rational self-interest. It is also called ethical egoism, right? And laissez-faire capitalism. uh, if you look at the John Rawls, and if you look at even previous philosophers, they talks about collective well-being. John Rawls was talking about social political institutions. He talks about justice, all these things. But Ayn Rand, she talks from an individual perspective, and she rejected this idea of collective well-being and all this. I'll explain. She told that when you think about collective well-being, when you talk about all these justice for from a social perspective, you are impacting individual rights. So when you think of even if there is a concept of utilitarianism, utilitarianism talks about maximum benefit to maximum number of people. But what about that minor the exclusions there? The same example of dam, 1 lakh people, construction of dam, it is going to help 1 lakh people, but it is ignoring that 5,000 people here. What about the rights of those 5,000 people? So here, these collective ideas, collective well-being, these kind of ideas are rejected by Ayn Rand here, and stand in stark contrast to collective and welfare oriented theories. Whatever Karl Marx told, that whatever John Rawls talked about, she rejected this idea. Her mainly focus is on individual human being, individualism, and the rational self-interest. This is what she talked about. Let me give her talk about her philosophy, the core philosophies, and then we'll talk about the philosophy of objectivism. What exactly she talks about? See, her again, what is the main goal according to her? See, most of the Western philosopher, almost all the Western philosopher, what is the ultimate aim, ultimate goal of life? Is the happy life. And again, her she also told that happy and healthy life is the ultimate goal of the life. So in order to achieve this, you can follow certain criteria, and she explained that also. See, you all have, let me talk it from my personal perspective. I have liberty to take decisions. So you have the freedom. Even the previous philosophers also talked about the freedom. Sartre also talked about the freedom only. You have all the freedom to take decisions. You have make your own choices. So there is a liberty. So there is a fact. She talks about liberty. You have liberty, but whatever the choices you make, you have to take the responsibility also. So whatever choices I make, you cannot blame others. You have to take responsibility. You have the liberty to make the choices and make those choices, and you have to take responsibility of consequences also, responsibility of outcomes also. This is what you cannot blame. Ultimately, you are responsible for your decisions, and even for the consequences, you are responsible. And she tells that if you want to help others. But if you does not help others, it is not considered something unethical. But if you look at the virtue ethicist, and even in the medieval period ethicist, charity, helping others, or being compassionate, these are called virtues. But she rejects all these ideas. See, if I want to help somebody, I will help. But if I don't want to help, still it is okay. It is not considered unethical. So this is a different perspective what she talked about. Help others, but no moral duty. I don't have that moral duty to help others. This is another important uh, philosophical concepts of Ayn Rand. And she talked about ethical egoism. Ethical egoism is that focusing on your self-interest, it is not evil. It is fine to focus on your self-interest, but make sure that your self-interest is not going to harm other person. This is what the rational self-interest, ethical egoism she talks about. So the first she talks about goal, ultimate goal is happy and healthy life. So in that journey you have that liberty, but whatever the decisions you make, you are responsible for it. Take that, whatever the consequences, you are responsible for that. And in that journey, if you want to help somebody else, but there is no moral duty on you to help others, so that is rejected by her. And also she talked about it is fine to focus on your self-interest, but there should be a rationality, ethical egoism, it's fine, but there should be an ethical factor, logical reasoning behind your self-interest. My self-interest, I want to happy, but I want to kill somebody to happy, no, that is not accepted. As long as your interest does not hurt others, as long as there is a rational self-interest, it is fine. So these are core philosophies of Ayn Rand here. And there are four aspects you need to remember, the core ideas of objectivism. The first is reality and reason. See, reality is that reality is separate, and whatever your conscience, your emotion, these are separate. And in order to understand this reality, what is necessary? See, one, there is a reality, and for to understand reality you need reason, rationality. So reasons helps you to develop knowledge, and this knowledge helps you to understand this reality. And this reality is independent of your consciousness, independent of your emotions, and emotions are not tools of cognitions. So ultimately reality is there around you, and this reality, you need to understand the reality of the life or the things around you. How do you understand it? There should be a reasoning, there should be a logical reasoning behind it, there should be a rationality behind it. And how do you get that rationality? That rationality you get it through the knowledge. So core ideas of objectivism: to understand reality you need knowledge. How do you get the knowledge? Through reasoning. Again, the concept of rationality is there here. And then the next concept is ethical egoism. I told that rational self-interest. It is fine to focus on your self-interest. The moral purpose of the life is pursuit of one's own rational self-interest. Fine, I have to focus on my self-interest, but make sure that your self-interest is not harming other person. And she mentions that there is a concept of altruism. Altruism is that helping somebody without expecting anything in return. And she told that even these concepts like altruism, these are all morally destructive, because if you want to be altruistic, it demands self-sacrifice. You have to sacrifice yourself to help others. She does not accept this concept. Self work on your self-interest. If you want to help others, but not helping others, it is not something immoral, it is not something unethical. When you think of altruism is that you're doing something without expecting anything, and in that journey, even in that journey harms you, you still do it. So this involves self-sacrifice, and she rejects this idea of self-sacrifice here. And she has given certain virtues. According to her, virtues are rationality, independence, integrity, honesty, justice, productivity. Altruism, all these things, compassion, all these things are not considered as virtue with respect to her. And the third, she talks about individual rights. John Rawls talking about collective rights, Karl Marx talking about collective rights, but she talks about individual rights. Even Sartre also talking about individualism. And even if you look at the some of the modern Western philosophers, they were also talking about individual rights. So here she also talked about individual rights uh, in a very radical way, I can say. See, rights are moral principles defining freedom of action in a social context. Right means I have certain privileges, I have certain freedom to do whatever I want in a social life. So from social construct, I have certain level of freedom. This is what rights. See, right of life, it implies right to liberty, right to property, and pursuit of happiness. No individual or group may violate another rights for social or collective well-being. See, if you talk about utilitarianism, here the rights of certain people, a damn example, 1 lakh people, they are getting advantage, but 5,000 people are getting impacted. Here what happens, these 5,000 people rights are compromised here, because we are thinking from a social perspective. At the, okay, this 1 lakh people are getting advantage, so it is fine to impact the rights of 5,000 people. She rejected this idea. She told that this is going to violate the rights of these people. So here the aspect, the for from the perspective you want to have a social well-being, you want to have a collective good, this is fine, but what you're doing, this is going to impact the right of individual. So she rejected this idea of collective well-being. So ultimately everybody has to focus on their self-interest, rational self-interest. If everybody focus on rational self-interest, it means that I want to be happy, but at the same time I'm not harming any other person. If everybody works in that principle, ultimately community will be positive, there will be positive things in the community, everybody will be happy in the community. So when you talk about social well-being, now you are compromising the rights of some people in a society. So she rejected that idea of collective goals or a social goal, these kind of ideas. So she focused on individual rights. This is the third concept under objectivism. And finally, political philosophy. She upholded the idea of capitalism, laissez-faire. It is capitalism, laissez-faire is that there is no intervention, especially under the economics. The concept is that everything balances on its own. The economic things, export and import, buying and selling of goods, everything is going to balance on its own. They should not be influenced by a government with respect to these things, with respect to these buying and selling goods, all these things. This is from a uh, economic perspective. But here the same thing she advocated even from a morality or individual rights perspective also. Here also government should not involve in manipulation. In the economic system, in the laissez-faire, government is not going to involve in the economic processes. But in the same way, even in individual rights perspective also, government should not interfere in that. The role of government is to protect the individual rights. You should not interfere in that. It should be like capitalism. So she supported the capitalism. She rejected the socialist ideas. She rejected the communist ideas. She rejected the ideas of the Karl Marx and John Rawls, all these things. She opposed socialism. She opposed the concept of welfare state. When you think of welfare state, you think from a collective perspective. When you think from a collective perspective, you are impacting rights of an individual. So these ideas of socialism, communist ideas, welfare state, redistributive justice, all these things, all these philosophical ideas are rejected. Ultimately, if she is rejecting all these things, she is supporting capitalism. This is the fourth concept of objectivism. So her works, there are two important ones. The Fountainhead, so it talks about creative individualism, and Atlas Shrugged, and it criticizes collectivism and glorifies productive achievers. Productive achievers is that individual level I am giving my contribution to the society. So individual productive achievers are glorified. And let's compare with other thinkers. Karl Marx talk about collectivism. Karl Marx talk about a class struggle, the haves and have-nots. So she rejected this idea, collectivism. When you think of collectivism, you are impacting the individual rights. So she rejected that. And even John Rawls also talked about. John Rawls talked about justice as fairness. Under the justice as fairness, he talked about equal distribution of benefits and proper distribution of rewards and punishment also. So she rejected this idea of redistribution of benefit to the least advantage. All these difference principle, all these things have been rejected by Ayn Rand. And she was against utilitarianism also. Utilitarianism also, the same example. 1 lakh people are supporting them, and the 5,000 people are impacted. And here the rights of 5,000 people is compromised here. Again, here you are these 5,000 people are sacrificing for the greater good, for the collective good of the society, for the collective good of the country. She rejected that also. And these are some of the comparison against socialism, against collective idea of John Rawls, against the utilitarian principle also. So what are the criticism, what are the limitation? The first is she's talking about rational self-interest. It is fine, but what, see, human being is a social animal. You cannot say that I will be rational or I will be focusing on rational self-interest all the time. It is not possible when you are a part of a society, when you are part of a social well-being. So it ignores social, me being a social being, I have certain social responsibilities. I have to uphold the social responsibility. Practically, it is impossible to dissociate myself from a society. So theory of ideas or a philosophy of Ayn Rand, it is ignoring social responsibility and structural inequalities. And ethical egoism may undermine compassion and social cohesion. Ethical egoism means I'm focusing on my self-interest. But what about this compassion? What about the aspect of love? What about the aspect of social cohesion? It directly impacts that also. There's another limitation. And the third is, it is considered impractical, especially from the context of social level, especially from the context of poverty and the public welfare. It is impractical also, to focus on individualism, to focus on this rational self-interest. And again, you're rejecting the idea of altruism, rejecting idea of helping others, not considering it as a moral duty. This is impractical from a social context. So these are some of the limitations of Iron Grant. I think this would cover the contemporary moral philosophers. And next, we are going to talk about Indian moral philosophy and thinkers in the next video. Most probably 2 videos will be sufficient to cover that. So thank you for listening. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good time.